There's still so many reasons to be excited about this Duke basketball season. And I think what we saw on Friday night's Countdown to Craziness is even more proof that this Duke basketball team's going to be really special.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. Today, we're talking more about Countdown to Craziness for this Duke men's basketball team. At the end of the show, we'll talk a little bit about Duke football's first loss of the season against Georgia Tech. And we've got our good friend Conor O'Neill back with us for his weekly visit. Really appreciate him taking time out of his schedule to be here with us today. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. The written algorithms love that. It really helps the algorithms when you're able to do those written reviews for us. Also, watch the show on YouTube for us each and every day. Like this video on YouTube, share it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to our YouTube channel, as the support that you give us here on Locked On Blue Devils does not go unnoticed. And I really appreciate everyone taking the time to watch the show each and every day. So again, as we said, Conor O'Neill is here with us on today's show. It's officially crossover season. We've officially got football and basketball content to discuss. I hope you're doing well, Conor.
Yeah, it's felt like crossover season for a week plus now.
Fair.
We had basketball media day. It was like 10 days ago. We're full into this thing.
No doubt. We've got, I guess, the official kind of ACC Tip-Off coming this week in Charlotte as well. That's going to have headlines and storylines. And but man, to get back inside Cameron Indoor Stadium, to see the Duke basketball team take the floor, to see the player introductions play out as they do each and every year. The Duke basketball team kind of running down onto the floor was kind of a different look that I love to see, to get the thing going on Friday night. I mean, what was it like to be back there inside Cameron?
Well, there's a new media table. That I thought was the biggest news. At least that was the biggest news when I walked in there like 3 hours before the thing started.
Give us the breakdown, man. Yeah.
You've got a little more space. I've always been a big believer in give me more length to the media table. I don't like those shorty tables where you can't fit. Look, I want to be able to fit my laptop, and then I'm a little old school. I like to take play-by-play on a yellow legal pad. I joke with Jordan all the time about my yellow legal pads. And they've got scribbles on them. The crazies that sit behind me probably look at me and like, what the hell is this guy doing? He's an idiot.
Yeah.
I want to be able to have my laptop and that like line up together. I don't want to have any overlap. I don't want to have half the legal pad have to be on the keyboard of the laptop. So we're a little
More
closer
tables.
to the crazies. We've got a little less space back there, but I'll take that if it means I have a little more length to the table.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, that's one of the first things you see. Then the team comes out. They've got player introductions. There's the women's basketball portion of Countdown to Craziness as well. Kind of more takeaways from just getting to be back there and seeing Duke basketball play out once again, Conor.
Yeah, my main thing is kind of in lockstep with John Shire and what he says. Countdown is fun for us. We get to see the team interact. We get to see a scrimmage. Like that's obviously the basketball portion of this that matters. But the most important part of Countdown is always going to be building the relationship between the Crazies and that year's team. And with Duke, last year was a bit of the exception with just 4 freshmen coming in. But this year it feels like it's going to be a little bit more the norm, where you've got some one and done guys. You've got some transfers that are only going to be here for a year. You need to get to know these guys. The fans and the crowd needs to get to know them. And that's why I like the player intros, that they can show a little bit more of their personalities. Obviously, Stanley Borden comes to mind immediately, going back to the instrument. I had fun talking to him about that. But Countdown is always going to be for the fans. It's not to die. It's not as much. I don't want to tell you what I can and can't discuss about what the product on the court looked like. But my number one takeaway is always going to be how the players react to being in Cameron for the first time with fans, right? They're in there practicing, in front of very few people. I think there were scouts, there were like ESPN's Jonathan Gavoni came through, but this is when there's actually crazies on there. This is when there's actually a crowd involved. And so getting them that experience, I think that's kind of the timeliness not the timeliness, the timelessness of Countdown. You're always going to have the immersion of new Duke players to the Duke crowd.
Without a doubt, it's really exciting just to see the guys get back in the venue and to wear the Duke, see what it looks like, right? Like Caleb Foster's wearing a headband for the first time ever. Cooper Flagg goes with the kind of undershirt underneath his jersey. Which wasn't expecting to see that. Maybe we'll see that throughout the course of the season. So you visually getting to see them kind of put on that Duke uniform for the first time. It's like, yeah, this is real. I can start to sort of picture them, not just in practice clothes or things like that.
Yeah, I was kicking myself for not getting a chance to get over to Mason Gillis in the open locker room because he's the transfer that told us he grew up a Duke fan. And I didn't know how much common knowledge that was in the recruiting process. I hadn't heard it. And it seems like it's kind of news to the rest of Duke fans since he said that at Media Day. So need to make sure I get to him at one of the exhibitions. But talking to Darren Harris, talking to Cooper Flagg, they were at Countdown last year, and hearing them talk about how different Countdown is from the recruit perspective to the actual playing and being a part of being on the court and having something to do with the crowd reactions and that kind of thing. We got to see Common Malawach put on a South Sudan flag as a cape, and then go out there and kind of float in the first 10 minutes. Like you kind of didn't even know he was out there for the first portion of the scrimmage. And then the second portion, he was one of the best players on the court with, I think it was 7 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 blocks. We're going to talk all year about how many shots he alters and how many shots he just deters and has people turn away from the rim because he's there. Just a good night, fun night. Nobody's going to be upset after a Countdown night, I don't think.
Duke basketball is back, and we absolutely love to see it. What an exciting night it is for the Blue Devils. Countdown to craziness is come and gone. We'll talk a little bit more about those individual performances, and then got to get to the football game over the weekend as well. But first, we're due for a break here on Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel, of course, is America's #1 sports book and the perfect place to go for NFL fans. Another pretty fun Monday Night Football game last night. We were able to watch the Kansas City Chiefs improve to 5-0 on the season with their defeat of the New Orleans Saints. And NFL fans can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play. And last night's game, I'm going on to FanDuel trying to figure out what in the world was that lateral from Travis Kelce over to Samaje Perine. How was that scored? You can see all of that and more over at FanDuel. And so much more on the place where you can place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, that's FanDuel.com, the perfect place to go. It's America's #1 sports book, and FanDuel is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. We continue here on Locked On Blue Devils today. I'm JJ Jackson alongside my pal Conor O'Neill. From Duke Rivals, we're talking about Countdown to Craziness. If you put the two games together, it's Caleb Foster who leads the way in scoring for the Duke basketball team. Just 2 points in the first scrimmage. He had 14 in the second. Didn't miss a shot from the floor in that second game. Already mentioned wearing the headband, which is what we weren't used to seeing a season ago. What stood out to you about #1's performance?
Stood out is how in control he was. And it's something that I don't remember him having that type of control last year, and that's kind of what you expect, right? He was a freshman last year. He's a sophomore this year. He was robbed of the last quarter of Duke's season last year. I I think sometimes we fall into the cliche and it doesn't ring true all the time of the biggest jump a player makes is between his freshman and sophomore year. I always, for some reason, my mind, especially when we go to the Duke conversation, part of this is Wendell Moore is flies in the face of that, right?
Yep.
That sophomore to junior year jump was phenomenal. But for Caleb, it can happen. And man, if Tyrese Proctor keeps coming along and then they get this jump out of Caleb, then guard play is not going to be much of an issue for this team.
Without a doubt. I'm excited to see how Caleb and Tyrese continue to play off one another. We're hearing John Shire talking a bit about Proctor getting more looks kind of off the ball and being ready as a shooter. The outside shooting was another kind of big talking point following countdown. So many different players are knocking down three-point shots, and that's just awesome to see, man. I think that this Duke basketball team, we talked about it on the show yesterday, Connor, but when you're asked kind of what the ceiling of their shooting could be this year, I think it's not crazy to say one of the best shooting teams in the entire country with the number of different guys who are going to be able to put up looks and being able to knock down the shots from the outside.
Yeah, I think the key is going to be is how many of them can shoot from the outside. And that's kind of where you get into talking about how well this team is constructed around Cooper Flagg. It's not that he's the superstar and everybody else is a role player. It's just that he's able to drive. He's able to create. He's able to get into the lane. He's not the only one, right? You need Tyrese Proctor to be able to penetrate a little more. You need Caleb Foster to be able to do that. Look at Sion James. He can penetrate. He is a physically gifted athlete. Let's put it at that. Up close and personal was one of the first takeaways when he was on the court. But you're gonna need driving kicks. You have the lob threat underneath with Common Malawach, but you need driving kick guys, and that's where Con Knipple is right there. John talked a little inside baseball with how he shoots and how he's a no dip guy. And I don't think he's talking about the chewing tobacco part of that. He's talking about how when he catches the ball, it's just catch and shoot. It's not catch and kind of gather himself to go up. It's just quick release. So that's where Con is going to kind of make his living, I think. And also I'm going to have to remind myself of this like every week, but it's slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Right.
Bo the dog doesn't really appreciate that, or he has a problem with one of the workers crawling the house across the street. But yeah, it's going to have a lot of shooting. I don't know if anybody on this team is going to be quite the level of shooter that Jared McCain was. But if you have enough shooting at every position, I think you can offset that. I think you don't have to have a guy that can go 6 for 6 or 7 for 7, that type of craziness that we saw from Jared a few times. As long as you get it spread out and it's coming from all angles of what you're doing on offense, I think that's a pretty good step for this team.
Connor, I'm proud of us. It's been kind of the longest we've gone so far in a Duke conversation over the last few weeks without getting into Cooper Flagg right away. We've put it off a little bit, but now I think we need to go there because, again, everyone in the world wants to see this guy play basketball this season, and we got to see that for the first time. Kind of mentioned his appearance in the Duke uniform itself. You mentioned getting to chat with him a little bit about the differences between, viewing this as a recruit and being out there on the floor. He was blocking shots. He was dunking. He was knocking down three-point shots. He was bringing the ball up the floor. Felt like we got to see him do pretty much everything you can do on a basketball court. And it's just 20 minutes out there on the floor in these scrimmages. That was insane to see.
Yeah, that's going to be the virtuoso Cooper Flagg performance. I'm not saying to freezing cold takes me if he scores 33 against somebody this year, but his typical games are going to be a little bit of everything. He does all things well. He doesn't, I think it's respectfully, he doesn't do anything spectacularly. The spectacularness of his game comes in how he's able to have a hand in every part of playing winning basketball. And that's what it's going to be. It's going to be rebounding, assists, penetration, playmaking, blocking shots, everything is going to be right there. And it was kind of on display on Friday night. The thing that cracked me up in talking to him was he kind of admitted like he was tired. He was a little worn down, and talking to him a little more about it, it was kind of clear, when you're so jacked up, you spend energy a lot faster than if you're kind of calm and cool and collected. He was a little bit on edge. Like, he was jacked up. He was ready to play. We know that he grew up a Duke fan, so you can only imagine how long he's been thinking about, maybe not specific to Countdown, but how long he's been thinking about being in Cameron, playing in front of people. And he'd been to Cameron a couple times before, but never played in front of people. He's part of the crowd. So actually getting out there on the court, actually having a Duke uniform on, that's back to the first thing we talked about with Countdown. Like, he spent some energy that was probably just a one-time, hey, this is what it's like to be in Cameron with a crowd here. And he was a little more burned out than I think we'll see him in November and December when there are actually games going on.
All right, so then our last kind of things here for Duke basketball, mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it is ACC Tip-Off week. John Shire and then Caleb Foster, Tyrese Proctor will make the cross-state trip over to Charlotte to be there for the festivities. I guess my question to you, Connor, what do you think are going to be kind of the big talking points as Shire and those two guards that he's got coming back get set for this upcoming season? We've seen them now play in a scrimmage setting against Duke in the blue-white game. What's there still to come with this group?
I think they're going to be talking about how over the next 3.5, that's less than a month to the opener, November 4th. So they're going to be talking more about developing a defensive identity. John Shire, I think it was said in the Countdown press conference afterward, he wants this team to have a defensive mentality. And I really think this team is going to more closely resemble his first team at Duke than it's going to resemble last year's team in the way that they're able to get after people on the defensive end, which means people are going to complain when they only score like 65 points and win an ACC game at some point. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. With Tyrese and Caleb, we're going to talk about how they've kind of made each other better by competing against each other. And it's easy to forget that they were in the same recruiting class until Tyrese reclassed. That was in the wake of the Trevor Keels decision to stay in the NBA draft. Like, these two would have come to Duke together and been freshmen together on that team last year with Jared McCain, and it had been a crowded freshman backcourt. But it was really fun, and it was kind of the most expected, I thought, part of the rosters going into the scrimmage. Like, I always want to see how John wants to divvy up the teams. You just knew going into it that Caleb would be on one team and Tyrese would be on the opposite team. You would not want to see those two together. You want to see them compete against each other. You want to see them get better. And they're also the two guys that are going to have the ball in their hands the most as the initiators of the offense. So their competition internally is going to be pretty fun to dive into, and I think we'll dig into that a good deal tomorrow.
Can't wait to see it all come together. A lot of coverage coming over at Duke Rivals with basketball content and football as well. Duke football suffers their first loss of the year against Georgia Tech. How does that happen, and how does the team respond? Conor O'Neill's got more for us after we take our final timeout here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by Roy. Duke fans, it's time now for the Roy Player of the Week. The Roy app here lets you go directly to the players and support your favorite athletes. Unlike collectives where you make a donation to a general fund, Roy lets you choose specific athletes you want to support. You back the players you care about, and in return, get exclusive content after the season, like personal videos and updates. And the best part, it's risk-free. If the athletes transfers or doesn't create the content, you get your money back. This week, I'm choosing Trey Freeman for our Player of the Week on Locked On Blue Devils. And Locked On Blue Devils just contributed $100 to his campaign. Big day for him, leading the Duke football team with 11 tackles on the field. If you want to join me in making a payment as little as $10, when enough of us contribute, it's not just about the dollars, it's about the message we send to Trey Freeman and this Duke football team. Our collective support keeps him connected to the school. Plus, Roy is doing their part to bring fans closer to the schools and athletes with an exciting giveaway. Roy is giving one lucky fan 2 tickets to any game of their choice in November. Here's how to enter. You just download Roy in the App Store or Google Play. Use code LOCKEDON when signing up, and you're entered. Already on Roy, make a payment to any athlete's campaign, and you'll also be automatically entered. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for official rules. Download Roy and try it out. There's no subscription, no recurring fees, and for as little as $10, you can get into the NIL game. Roy, support the players, change the game. Roy is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, I'm JJ Jackson, joined today by Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated. Promote your website, if you will, Conor.
Man, Duke.rivals.com is where you can find Devils Illustrated. Really think if you're a Duke fan, you should check it out. We've got fresh stories popping every day, a lot of days, multiple stories in the day. You'll want to check in on the message boards. There's a Boozer Twin update with decision looming. You want to check out the basketball recruiting nuggets thread. It's updated as I get information from sources in the program. So you know that the stuff is coming from a good place, and love to check it. We'll love to have everyone check it out.
Let's go check it all out and support Conor's work. Again, duke.rivals.com. All right, we'll transition now to football to wrap up our program here today. This Duke football team, 3 straight weeks to open up the year, scoring 26 points in every contest. That's got to come to a close. 3 straight weeks, Star Thomas is able to eclipse the 100-yard rushing mark. That comes to a close. 5 straight weeks, Duke football is in the win column, and unfortunately, that must come to a close as well, Conor, as Duke falls 24-14 against Georgia Tech. How did that happen?
Yeah, gosh, when you're running down the streets that ended, it's just kind of like it's the train was gonna roll to a stop eventually. It's an easy excuse to make, but it is a reality of the situation that it is tough to go through a football season when you go through. It's not just the 6 games in a row. It's the fall camp for 5 weeks that precedes the season. That's about 10 to 11 weeks straight of so much routine, so much practices, conditioning, hitting each other. Even as limited as they are in fall camp these days, it's still a grind of a month in August when temperatures are as hot as they're going to be all year. And then you play 6 games, and it's not like they cruised through 6 games. Those first 5, there were a lot of stressful moments. And on one hand, it's good to be battle tested like that. But on the other hand, it takes something out of you. And so I thought Duke was in a great place when they're going into the fourth quarter up 14-10. And we've heard all about not just coming off of the Carolina game, but this team has been plus 100 in the fourth quarter of games for the last 2.5 seasons, and they get outscored 14-0. So down to plus 86 is still a good place to be, but you don't expect a team like this with their proven track record to get outscored by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter of a game. And when you start looking for reasons that happened, I can't separate from how much of a grind they had to go through to get to this point. And it wound up catching up with them in Atlanta.
Without a doubt. I mean, credit to Georgia Tech for getting the job done. A good Saturday night environment there in right in the heart of Atlanta at Bobby Dodd Stadium. Duke trying to make that comeback. Todd Polino misses a field goal when it feels like, you can cut it to a touchdown game and then see what you got there at the end of it. I mentioned Star Thomas's streak of 100-yard rushing games coming to a close. I thought that's kind of a big piece in all of this, right? Because Duke's identity in the past few wins is like, hey, we're going to bully people and run the football. And in a lot of ways, they weren't as successful doing that.
Yeah, the offensive line in the last 2 games, every starter has played every single snap. So when you're able to do that against Carolina and wear them down in the fourth quarter, then it's great. It's commendable. It's unexpected a little bit since Eric Shawn had been getting in there, at least in a little bit of a rotation at guard. But then when it happens at Georgia Tech and you're still looking at the same 5 guys with the same snap counts and no 6th offensive lineman was in there other than on special teams, it's kind of like, man, these guys were drained. And the other part of it, and Manny was big into this, and like Georgia Tech is not a bad football team by any measure. Their whole identity under Brent Key has been to be physical. I think they said on the broadcast that Brent told the TV crew that like their goal is for people to hate playing them because of how physical they are, because that's the way they want to be built. I mean, he's a former offensive lineman. He was their offensive line coach. It all rhymes when you add it all together. So,
yeah.
You know, that they, again, it's going to sound like I'm making excuses for Duke. I'm not trying to do that. It was a bad matchup all around. When you consider Duke had 5 straight games, Georgia Tech was coming off an off week. I'm typically banging the drum of teams coming off an off week are not the locks to be the more fresh team or the better team. A lot of times those teams coming off an off week need a quarter or two to find their rhythm. But I think with Georgia Tech, we saw a team that came out hot and had kind of used the off week to their advantage and gotten some legs back, gotten back to the physicality that they want to play with. And so it just for several reasons was a bad matchup. And then you throw in the fact that, you know, Malik Murphy missed some throws again. He's been inconsistent in most games, and he wasn't able to find the same gear that he had gotten to in the second half of some other games. And it was a bad storm. I'm not going to call it a perfect storm. I mean, it was a 10-point loss and Duke had a lead going into the fourth quarter, but it was just a bad conversion of a few different things for Duke's football team.
And now this Duke football team gets an off week themselves to kind of rest up before the final 6 games of the year. They'll play 4, have their second off week of the season, and then have the last 2 games. As folks can see the schedule scrolling across the bottom of the screen if you're watching with us here on YouTube with Locked On Blue Devils. So looking at this off week and then what's to come in the ACC for the Duke football team, how can they use this week to better themselves going into the rest of the season, Conor? What does it look like when we look at where Duke's at, the schedule they've got coming up out of the off week? Like, what's the best way to kind of spend this week for Duke?
I think the best week is to get some rest. I think some things have to be figured out offensively. A lot of it has to do with the way Malik starts games. I don't want to pretend to tell Duke's staff or Malik what he should do, but it kind of is like, is he warming up the right way? Is he getting everything out of the pregame warm-up that he needs to? Look, Florida State, like, it's funny going into the season. We all looked at this game and we're like, oh my God, that's a juggernaut of a Friday night game. They've reloaded. Now it's like, wow, Duke needs to win that game, wrap up bowl eligibility. And, you know, then we're talking about revenge of last year's trip at Florida State, all that good stuff. A home game against SMU follows it. I mean, they're not world beaters. They've turned some things around after the quarterback change about a few weeks ago, but this is still a semi-manageable schedule for Duke. The trip at NC State looks a lot less daunting than it did 2 months ago. The home game against Virginia Tech, I mean, they're not particularly scary right now. I think that the ship hasn't sailed on this being still a really, really good historical perspective-wise season for Duke, with talking about a potential for a 8 or 9, maybe 10-win season.
Without a doubt, I'm excited to see how Duke can come out of the off week, excited to see if they could beat Florida State for the first time ever. And a lot of good stuff here on the show today from our good friend, Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated, Duke.Rivals.com. Good to see you once again, man. Enjoy the off week from the Duke perspective, and we'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Conor O'Neill joining us here on today's show, as he does each and every week. Really good stuff, and do support him over at Devils Illustrated. Become a part of that community. You get Boozer Twins updates when you do that. and so much more. So go check it all out over there. All right, that does it for our show here today. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.